As the high-stakes Trump-Putin summit is set to take place in Alaska with global eyes set on U.S. efforts to end Ukraine's war, pressure mounts to include President Zelensky, and the European Union stresses that diplomacy alone isn't enough. Meanwhile, the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that any deal between Washington and Moscow to end the war in Ukraine must include Ukraine and the EU. She has convened a meeting of the European foreign ministers on Monday to discuss next steps. Mohammad Absarul Hassan tells us the story.
Alaska is preparing to host a high-stakes summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, aimed at negotiating an end to the ongoing war in Ukraine. But EU countries are pushing for a broader trilateral format, urging the inclusion of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the talks. European leaders, including those from Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and Finland, as well as European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, welcomed the proposed summit but emphasized that the diplomacy alone is not enough. In a joint statement, they insisted on maintaining pressure on Moscow to ensure the protection of both Ukrainian and European security interests. Meanwhile, top EU diplomat Kaja Kallas said that any deal between the United States and Russia to end the war in Ukraine must include Kiev and the bloc, as she called for an emergency meeting of EU ministers. Responding to these calls, the White House said President Trump is open to a trilateral meeting with Putin and Zelensky, but for now, a bilateral summit remains scheduled at Putin's request. Meanwhile, US Vice President J.D. Vance met in London with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy as well as Ukrainian and European officials. Discussions included Ukraine's security concerns with participants such as Andriy Yermak, head of Ukraine's presidential office, and Rostem Umerov, secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. President Zelensky described recent security talks with allies in Britain as constructive, noting that Ukraine's concerns were acknowledged and seriously considered.
Вже була щойно доповідь нашої команди з Британії.
There have been talks between security representatives of the United States and Europe, Ukraine, the United States, Vice President Vance, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, and Poland. The meeting was constructive. All our messages were conveyed. Our arguments are being heard. The risks are being taken into account. The path to peace for Ukraine must be determined together and only together with Ukraine.
Ukraine has firmly stated that it will not surrender any territory captured by Russian forces since the war began in February 2022. Russia launched what it called a special military operation shortly after Ukraine expressed its intent to join NATO, triggering one of Europe's most devastating conflicts in decades. As Washington prepares for a possible turning point in US-Russia relations, the pressure is growing to ensure Ukraine has a direct seat at the table and that peace efforts do not come at the cost of its sovereignty. Mohammad Absarul Hassan reports for DD India.